was a I mean, compared to now. I mean, the invasion of Ukraine, where they massed 180,000 troops over weeks on the Ukrainian border that the world could see. But what happened in Crimea in 2014, if folks remember, was the sneaking in of Crimea of the so-called little green men, which Putin for weeks denied were Russian military, were actually Spetsnaz, the Russian special forces. But you know, and I can't speak for everything that the US government knew, but there was a lot that we didn't know. It was a surprise. People didn't think that he was actually going to annex Crimea. And what we did know was that the messaging that they had done around the revolution of dignity in Ukraine in 2014, of accusing the Ukrainians of being Nazis or neo-Nazis, of being anti-Semitic, all of these memes and kind of symbols that resonate with the Russian audience. And remember, just in general, I'm going to pull back for 1 second. There are multiple audiences here. And for Putin, ultimately, his domestic audience is probably his most important audience, the most important circle within the concentric circles. As Americans, we, because we're narcissists, we tend to think everybody's messaging to us, and that's all that they're thinking about. But that's not all that Vladimir Putin is thinking about. So what grew out of that annexation of 2014 was the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, which already existed, which was creating messaging around the upheaval in Ukraine. And then they transferred it to the 2016 election. What they used then were cutouts, bots, fake personas. And one of the things that I write about in the book is that it's not that they were so good, it's that we were so susceptible. You know, disinformation is always seeks a kind of a buyer's audience, and people are receptive to it. So if you look back at the kind of content they were creating around 2014, even focused on Ukraine, it was simple. It wasn't smart, wasn't witty. When the stuff they did in English in 2014 was ungrammatical, poor use of American idioms. But as someone once explained to me, it's like the emails that you get from the prince in New Zealand or Africa, wherever it is, asking for money for $1 million, and you'll get 10 million back, and it's filled with grammatical mistakes and spelling errors. Marketing guy said, that's deliberate. I said, why is that? He said, because then they know they have you hooked if you respond. If you're not put off by the grammatical mistakes and the bad idioms, you're a sucker. And that is what happened in 2016, and the stuff that the Russians did here. Again, it's not that it was so successful or so sophisticated, it's that we were so susceptible. Cut to this invasion, and the Russian messaging has seemed antiquated, very yesterday, very clunky. And by the way, they are clunky, but they had the advantage of surprise in 2014, which they don't have now. So we just we've seen how clunky they are, how uncreative they are, which again they were back then, and in fact it surprises me. And Clint knows way more about Russian messaging than I do, but part of the Russian ethos is of hybrid warfare, as we call it, the Gerasimov doctrine, who after the general who's close to Putin, this idea that in modern warfare, 4/5 of it is not kinetic, is information war, is propaganda, etc. They have a kind of a sophisticated 30,000-foot view, but not in terms of executing it. I mean, if that was really your doctrine, what Putin should have said is, I want to see the top 10 memes that you're going to release, on the day of the invasion, and show me the propaganda that we're sending to Ukrainians, and that they would have this whole information war blocked out like they have their old-fashioned kinetic war. Well, they didn't have that, and because Putin's expectations and maybe their military's expectations were wrong, that they would be greeted with bouquets of flowers, and maybe that would be their information, their memes. In fact, the Ukrainians have fought valiantly. They haven't submitted. If anything, Putin has caused all the things that he didn't want to have happen, which is the consolidation of NATO and the rise of nationalism in Ukraine and appreciation for democracy. But their cupboard was bare; they had nothing, and just to my kind of artificial eye. And then they had been overwhelmed by the creativity and nimbleness of the Ukrainians on TikTok, obviously on Facebook and traditional platforms. But people have been calling TikTok war talk. There's so much Ukrainian stuff on it, and a lot of it is great. And again, it's witty, quick, etc. So the short answer to your question, Sinan, is that the Russian 2014 versus Russian 2022 is like day and night. They've really seemed outmastered. They've seen behind the times, years out of date, and they're paying the price for it. And to go back where I started, I also wrote about the counter-ISIS messaging we did in government, which was going on at the same time as the annexation of Crimea. And a American general said to me, the worst message is when ISIS takes a city from us, and the best message is when we take a city from ISIS. There is a reality on the ground. And part of the reason the Russians have been outmastered, outnumbered, is because the reality on the ground isn't very good for them.
Excellent. I really appreciate that insight. And